We've been together for 29 years, married for 26 of them. I'm 51, she's 49, and we have 2 grown kids, a 24-year-old son and a 22-year-old daughter. We met in college, started dating, fell in love, and eventually tied the knot, building what I believe to be a strong, fulfilling marriage. Our relationship was filled with shared experiences, constant communication, and a commitment to facing challenges as a team. We both had successful careers and always supported each other's ambitions. Our love life? Maybe not as frequent as when we were younger, but still just as passionate. She works in IT, and I own a landscaping business with 75 employees, something I built from the ground up after graduating. Since COVID, she's been working from home more often, and we had been discussing a shift in our work-life balance. The idea was for me to step back from the day-to-day operations of my business while she went part-time, giving us more time to travel and enjoy life together, now that the kids were independent. Looking back, I saw no warning signs, no secretive texting, no sudden change in how she dressed, no unusual behavior, and no suspicious late nights at work. When she went out, it was usually with friends or family, and someone would always mention the next day that I should have joined them. But I liked that she had her own space, just as I enjoyed mine, tinkering away in my workshop. She always came home early. So to say I was blindsided is an understatement. D-Day. Last week, I planned a surprise anniversary weekend for us at a friend's cozy little B&B during the winter festival. I wrapped up work early, eager to surprise her, and told her to pack a bag for a getaway. As I pulled into our driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked outside. Immediately, a feeling of unease settled in my gut. I had no reason to suspect anything, but something just felt off. I sat there, hoping I was wrong, but deep down I knew. I hesitated, running through my options. Should I drive away and confront her later? Pretend I didn't see anything? My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. But when I'm faced with tough situations at work, I always tell myself to suck it up and handle it. That thought steadied me. My trembling stopped, replaced by an eerie calm. I slipped in through the back door. My black lab, who usually greeted me with boundless energy, just lay there, looking sad. As if even he sensed something was wrong. Instead of his usual wagging tail and excited jumps, he just watched me. I crept up the stairs. The closer I got to our bedroom, the clearer the sounds became. My stomach twisted, but I kept moving. When I reached the door, I didn't hesitate. I swung it open. There he was, her boss, on top of my wife. For a moment, I just stood there. Then, with all the sarcasm I could muster, I said, "Surprise!" The chaos that followed would have been hilarious if it hadn't been ripping my heart apart. He panicked, scrambling to get off her, but got tangled in the sheets instead. She shrieked, repeatedly yelling, "Oh my God!" while desperately trying to cover herself, except she couldn't, because he was still flailing around like an idiot. When he finally freed himself, he started searching for his clothes. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach turn. His clothes were on the same side of the bed where mine usually ended up. Without thinking, I moved first, grabbed them before he could. My wife sat there, sobbing, repeating, "I'm so sorry," over and over. I backed up to the doorway, still holding his clothes, while he stood awkwardly by the bed, completely naked. I grabbed the armchair from the corner, dragged it to the door, and sat down. He asked for his clothes. I tossed him my wife's robe instead. Then he made the mistake of stepping toward me. Now, I'm not a small guy, 6 feet 3 inches, 240 pounds. Years of working out and running a landscaping business have kept me in solid shape. I locked eyes with him and said, "If you take one more step, This ends with you in the hospital and me in jail. So how about you just sit down? He listened. My wife had buried her face in the pillow, muffling her sobs. After a long, awkward silence, he finally spoke. So what now? I exhaled slowly. I have no idea. Eventually, I pulled out my phone and said, Here's what's going to happen. You're both going to tell me everything. And I mean everything. While I recorded, they exchanged uneasy glances before my wife hesitantly asked, What do you mean by everything? I shot back, Exactly what it sounds like. When it started. How long? Where? Hotels, dinners, the works. Every single detail. She shook her head, tears spilling again. This was the first time. I swear. I barked out a bitter laugh. Bull asterisk asterisk. You don't bring someone into our bed the first time you cheat. That only happens when you're comfortable. So don't lie to me again, because if you do, I'm walking out of here and straight to a divorce lawyer. Asterisk asterisk. She broke down completely then. And for the next 15 minutes, the truth came pouring out. It had been going on for over 9 months. It started with him flirting. It started with innocent flirtation, or so she claimed. One thing led to another, and eventually he invited her to lunch. She accepted. A few drinks later, they ended up in a hotel room. And just like that, she came home to me that night as if nothing had happened. She swore it tore her apart, that she wanted to confess but didn't know how. I call bull asterisk asterisk dot asterisk asterisk if it had truly been eating her alive. She wouldn't have kept doing it so effortlessly. They even went to a week-long work conference, the same one I used to attend with her every year. She told me the company had changed its policy, that spouses were no longer allowed. I didn't think twice about it. Turns out, that was just another lie. The room went silent again as I processed everything. Then an idea hit me. I reached into his pile of clothes, dug around until I found his phone, and held it up. Unlock it. To my surprise, he did. No hesitation. Maybe he thought I wouldn't find anything. Maybe he knew he had no choice. Either way, I started scrolling. First, I came across a few pictures of a woman, his wife, I assumed. What's her name? I asked. Carol. She was attractive. Not as stunning as Ashley, but still a beautiful woman. Then I swiped further. Pictures of kids. 3 of them. And finally, a family portrait. I turned the screen toward him. Lovely family. Why would you risk it all for a fling with my wife? His response? A pathetic, What do you mean, risk it all? I nearly laughed. You actually think Carol won't find out? His face paled. How would she? Because I'm about to call her. Right now. He shot up from his seat. No, you can't. And then, from across the room, my wife, cried out, Please, don't do this to him. That was it. That was the moment my last shred of restraint snapped. I turned on her, voice trembling with fury. Don't do this to him? You destroyed me. Our family. Our future. You ripped my heart out, and you're worried about him? I was shaking again, struggling to keep my emotions in check. I didn't want to break down in front of him. But I was losing that battle. My chest tightened, and before I knew it, I slumped into the chair, hands covering my face as the sobs took over. She moved toward me, reaching out. Stay back, I ordered, not even looking at her. I needed to regain control. Wiping my face, I exhaled sharply and glanced at his phone again. He was still pleading. Please, I'll tell her myself. I swear. Yeah, sure you will. I wasn't about to leave this in his hands. Ignoring his desperate protests, I scrolled through his contacts until I found her number. Carol. and instead of just calling, I hit FaceTime. She answered after a few rings, her face puzzled. "Who are you? Is my husband okay?" I flipped the camera to him. There he stood, in my wife's floral robe, his face twisted in guilt and fear. "I think you're familiar with this man." Then I panned the phone around, and this is where I found him. In my bedroom. Wearing your husband's robe is my wife, who's currently hiding under the sheets. Carol gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My wife tried to shrink further into the bed, but it was too late. "That's my wife," I told her, "and I walked in on them today." Her expression crumbled. She began to cry. He went straight into damage control mode. "Honey, please, I can explain. It was just one time." I cut in. "Don't believe a word he says. It's been going on for 9 months. I have it all recorded. Every detail they admitted to." Through her sobs, she managed to nod. "Send it to me." "I will." I promised to text her my number so she could send me her email. Then I handed him his phone. The moment he had it back, she didn't hesitate. "When you get home, your bags will be packed and waiting outside. If you try to step foot in this house, I'll call the cops." She hung up. I grabbed his clothes and hurled them at him. "Get dressed. Get out." He fumbled to put them on, his hand shaking so badly that it took longer than it should have. Finally, without another word, he walked out. Just us. Now it was just me and her. She turned to me, eyes red and swollen, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." I stared at her, emotionless. "Pack your things and leave." She flinched, fresh tears streaming down her face. "Can't we just talk?" "Maybe, but not now." I made my way downstairs and poured myself a drink, sinking onto the couch. Moments later, I heard her footsteps behind me. "Please," she begged, stepping closer. Without looking at her, I said, "Just stop." She froze. "Can we at least talk about this?" I exhaled slowly, gripping the glass in my hand. "I don't know if I can resist calling a divorce attorney." Her breath hitched. She gazed at me, and I could see it coming, the word she wanted to say. "I love you." I lifted a hand to stop her. Don't say those words. Not now. Because I don't think I'll ever trust them again." Her face crumpled. More tears. Then she turned and walked out the door. As I watched her leave, something inside me shattered completely. My entire world, my life as I knew it, was walking out that door. I collapsed onto the floor, shaking, sobbing uncontrollably. I don't know how long I stayed there. Eventually, I forced myself to sit up, still gasping for air, and reached for my phone. I called my best friend. The moment he answered, I tried to speak, but nothing came out. The tears were back, choking me. "What's wrong?" he asked. Silence. "Are you home?" I barely managed a grunt. "Yeah, I'm on my way." 30 minutes later, he was there. I was still in the same spot, still crying. Without saying a word, I handed him my phone. The video paused on the screen. He took it, pressed play, and started watching. I couldn't bear to hear it again. I got up, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself another drink. He followed me, grabbed the glass out of my hand, and dumped both our drinks in the sink. "This isn't the answer." I didn't argue. I had no energy left. "You're not staying here alone tonight." He glanced down at my dog, who had been lying beside me the whole time. "Go pack a bag. We're going to my place." I nodded. When I came back downstairs, my best friend had my black lab on a leash. Without another word, we walked out the door. Dan and I have been best friends for as long as I can remember, so it's no surprise that our families are just as close. Our kids grew up together, and back when they were younger, we'd take them on family camping trips. Over the years, his wife, Terry, and mine became close friends too. That detail would become painfully relevant in the hours to come. The drive to his house was mostly silent. I was drowning in my thoughts, while Dan, on the other hand, was growing visibly angrier by the minute. By the time we arrived, he was fuming. The moment we stepped inside, he turned to Terry and blurted, "Did you know?" She blinked, confused. "Know what?" His voice rose. "Did you know?" I stepped between them. "Dan, calm down. This isn't her fault." Realizing he was out of line, he took a breath, then hugged Terry and muttered an apology. She was still bewildered, but before she could ask what was going on, Dan handed her my phone. "Watch this." I walked outside with my dog. I didn't need to hear it again. A few minutes later, Terry came outside, tears streaming down her face. Without a word, she pulled me into a long, tight hug. For the first time that night, I let myself lean into it. When we walked back inside, the three of us sat in the living room, talking, crying some more, and then talking again. Through it all, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. I didn't have to check to know who it was. I erased every message without reading them. Then my phone rang. "My son?" I answered, trying to steady my voice. "Dad, what's going on?" "Mom showed up at my place. She's saying you kicked her out." I exhaled. "Did she tell you why?" "No." "Hand her the phone. She can explain it herself." He hesitated. "Why?" "Because if she won't, I'll send you the video." And with that, I hung up. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time, my son was sobbing. What the actual, Dad, what the hell?" I swallowed back my own emotions and shifted into dad mode, trying to calm him down. "I know, son." "I know. But listen to me, it's going to be okay. None of this is your fault." He took a shaky breath, trying to compose himself. "Are you okay?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Of course not." Silence. Then, in a small voice, he said, "Mom's staying here tonight." "I figured." The call ended. Before I had time to process, my phone rang again. My daughter. And that's when I remembered I had asked her to watch Cooper while we were supposed to be away for the weekend. Her voice was light, unaware. "Hey, where's Cooper? I thought I was watching him while you and Mom were gone." I sighed. "Change of plans. We're not going anymore. But you can still stay at the house if you want." She paused. "Wait, what do you mean you're not going? Where are you?" "I'm at Dan and Terry's." "And Mom?" "She's at your brother's." Silence. Then, "Dad, tell me what's going on." I closed my eyes. "I can't. Not right now. I'll come by the house tomorrow, and we'll talk." She wasn't having it. "Dad, just tell me." "Tomorrow." She sighed in frustration, but didn't push further. "Fine." She hung up. I knew exactly what was coming next. So I sent my son a quick message. "Heads up. She's about to call you." Then I dialed my wife. She answered with a sob. "Are you going to tell our daughter, or am I?" More crying. No words. I ended the call. Half an hour later, there was a knock at the door. Dan opened it. My daughter. The moment she saw me in tears, she ran to me. We collapsed into each other, both of us sobbing. She didn't even know why yet. She just knew something terrible had happened. After a long moment, we pulled apart, still clinging to each other. I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and called my wife again. "She's here. Are you going to tell her, or should I put you on speaker?" My daughter frowned. "Mom? Tell me what?" But all she got in response was more crying. I clenched my jaw, ended the call, and turned to face her. My little girl. My baby? I found out today that your mother has been having an affair for the past 9 months. I thought I had already felt the worst of the pain. I was wrong. Watching the light drain from her eyes, seeing her hands tremble as she processed the words, I couldn't take it. My legs gave out, and I collapsed onto the floor. I was a wreck, sobbing harder than I had all night. And she just stood there, silent, too shocked to even cry. Terry, eyes red with tears of her own, rushed to comfort her. Sweetheart, I know this hurts, but I promise we're going to get through this. You're not alone. Dan was crying too. Our families had been so intertwined. His pain was nearly as raw as mine. And then, finally, my daughter let out this heart-wrenching, guttural cry, the kind of sound that would haunt me for the rest of my life. I pulled her into my arms, holding her as tightly as I could, whispering apologies I knew wouldn't change a thing. At some point, we moved to the couch. None of us knew what to say. After a long silence, I finally asked, "Are you going to be okay?" She wiped at her face and looked at me with more strength than I expected. "Don't worry about me, Dad. Are you going to be okay?" I forced a weak smile. "I'll manage." She nodded. "I want to take Cooper with me. And can Tim stay over?" "Of course." I was relieved. At least she wouldn't be alone. After she left, Terry's grief turned into rage. "I can't believe she did this." And then she let loose. Every insult, every name under the sun, she spat them all. Then she turned to me, determination in her eyes. "I'm calling her." She expected me to protest. Instead, I shrugged. "Go ahead. Just put it on speaker." And so she did. She dialed. The moment my wife picked up, Terry started with small talk, keeping her voice neutral. Then, finally, she dropped it. Mike called Dan in tears. After she left the house, I stayed behind, trying to process everything. Terry, now fully caught up on the details, was livid. She didn't hold back. "What the hell were you thinking? How could you? Why didn't you talk to me before you went down this road? If something was missing, why didn't you talk to Mike? You know how understanding he is. Do you have any idea how many people you hurt?" Her voice cracked with emotion. "Darlene just left here. I can't even begin to describe the look on her face when Mike told her. And Dan and I? We'll never be able to see you the same way again. How could you be so damn selfish?" More sobbing on the other end. My wife kept repeating how sorry she was, how much she regretted it. But Terry didn't say another word. She just let her cry. I took a deep breath and motioned for Terry to hand me the phone. "Ashley." No response. I called her name again, more firmly this time. "Ashley." Finally, she sniffled and croaked out, "Yes, babe?" I clenched my jaw. "You lost the right to call me that." She broke down again. I wasn't done. "Tell me, what exactly are you sorry for? If I hadn't come home early, would you have realized the weight of what you were doing? Or would you have just gone on with your affair and slept with him again after we got back from our trip?" More crying. I shook my head. "You're not really sorry for what you did. Not for how you hurt me. Not for what you did to our kids. Not even for what you did to his wife and their family. You're just sorry you got caught." And with that, I ended the call. Dan, Terry, and I sat in silence for a while, talking here and there, my phone still buzzing nonstop. Eventually, exhaustion won out. I tried to sleep but couldn't. My mind was racing, replaying everything over and over. By morning, I was ready to leave. I asked Dan to drive me home, hugged Terry, and thanked them both for everything. "You two mean the world to me," I told him. Then I mentioned my plan. I was heading to my cabin for some time alone. Dan nodded. That's probably the best thing you can do right now. As we drove, I noticed a new message among the flood of notifications. It was from Carol, my wife's boss's wife. She thanked me, said she appreciated the truth. Then she left her email. I forwarded the video without hesitation, adding that she could reach out if she needed to talk. Maybe we could help each other process this nightmare. When we pulled up to the house, I was careful not to wake Darlene and Tim as I packed my things. I didn't want to put them through another emotional scene. Loading up my truck, I grabbed a couple of my .22 rifles. Target practice was something I usually did at the cabin. Dan eyed me warily. "Not this time," he said, taking them from me. I didn't argue. Cooper hopped into the truck, and we took off. The drive was long, about 2.5 hours, but I welcomed the distance. When I finally arrived, I opened up the cabin, started a fire, and took a walk with Cooper through the woods. It helped. A little, but not enough. While I was outside, my son called. "Hey, Dad. You okay? I'm at the cabin. You need anything?" "No." I hesitated, then added, "If your mom wants to stay at the house, that's fine. But she needs to be gone before I come back." "Understood." After the call, I spent time chopping firewood. Every swing of the axe felt like a release, anger, betrayal, heartbreak. Each strike landed on an image of her and him. Over and over. I stayed there for 3 days, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. By Monday morning, I was ready to make some moves. The first call was to my office, letting them know I'd be away for a bit, but still reachable for emergencies. The next was to my company's attorney. He wasn't a divorce lawyer, but he knew someone. "I've got a great referral," he said. "Someone who won't waste your time." I had an appointment set for Thursday. Next, I called the bank, froze our joint accounts. Then I canceled all our shared credit cards and requested new ones in my name only. Being alone in the woods had given me clarity. I wasn't just going to sit back and let this play out. I had to take control. But still, doubt crept in. Could I really go through with this? Was there any chance of salvaging our marriage? When I got home, I stumbled across a subreddit dedicated to infidelity and divorce. I spent hours reading stories from people who had been through the same hell. It helped, but not as much as I hoped. Midweek, I went into the office and met with my HR manager. We had always had a strong professional relationship, but now, things got personal. I told her everything. She sat in stunned silence, then finally said, "Before you go to their company, talk to your lawyer first." She also asked, "Are you going to get tested?" The question caught me off guard, but she was right. She gave me a recommendation, and I scheduled appointments with both my doctor and the testing center. Thursday came fast. I met with my lawyer, and for the first time, I actually sat through the entire video. I had avoided listening to it before, but this time, I forced myself. When it ended, she shook her head. "Why do people do such stupid things?" Then she told me why she had no patience for cheaters. Her own husband had cheated on her, dragged her through hell. It was what led her to switch her entire career to divorce law. "You're going to be okay," she reassured me. And then I signed the contract. I asked about informing their HR department, about telling other people in their company. "Not yet," she said. "We'll handle this strategically." In the meantime, I finally had a conversation with my wife. She had been staying at our son's place. At least she had enough sense to realize I needed space. But I knew this was just the beginning. She wasn't at the house when I returned, giving me the space I needed. But even with her gone, I couldn't bring myself to sleep in our bedroom. Just walking into that space made my stomach turn. Instead, I crashed on the couch every night, grabbing whatever clothes I needed from the closet in one trip just to avoid going back in. Writing this has been harder than I ever expected. The part about my daughter wrecked me. I sat here for hours, barely able to type through the tears. But I promised an update, so here it is. Before I continue, I just want to say how deeply grateful I am for all the advice, support, and encouragement I've received. I never imagined so many people would take the time to help me navigate this mess. I owe you all more than I can ever repay. A lot of you have commented on how strong I've been, but the truth? I don't feel strong. I'm just surviving. I'm just going through the motions, trying to put one foot in front of the other. I think I'm finally accepting that there's no way back from this. I'm 99% certain of what my decision will be. And yet, I still struggle with the thought of throwing away 29 years of life together. Even now, I can't bring myself to refer to her as my ex. She's still my wife in my mind, and I don't know why. Maybe I'm just not ready to let go. Maybe I never will be. What the hell is wrong with me? On D-Day, she ended up at our son's house, blindsiding him and his wife. When he called, confused as to why I kicked her out, I told him, "She needs to explain, or I will." My daughter, who was supposed to be dog-sitting, returned home only to find no dog and no answers. Eventually, she tracked me down at my friend's house, demanding to know what was wrong. Telling her was harder than catching my wife in bed with her boss. Her reaction, her pain, shattered me in a way I wasn't prepared for. I could handle my own heartbreak, but watching her break down because of what her mother had done, that was something else entirely. After she left, I packed up, took the dog, and retreated to my cabin. 3 days of solitude. 3 days of walking through the woods, chopping firewood, and trying to clear my head. By Monday, I was ready to take action. I started making calls, bank accounts, credit cards, and finally, a lawyer. My usual business attorney recommended someone he trusted. I called, scheduled an appointment, and met with her that Thursday. She was sharp, confident, and took no nonsense. When I played her the video, she shook her head and muttered, "Why do people do such stupid things?" Turns out, she had been through something similar. Her husband cheated on her, dragged her through hell, and it changed her entire career path. She became a divorce attorney because of it. I hired her on the spot. When I asked about informing my wife's boss and their HR department, she advised me to hold off. For now. I returned home, still avoiding the bedroom. The couch had become my new normal. Then, on Friday, my son called. "Dad, she can't stay here anymore. It's too much for me and his wife. Can she come back to the house?" I hadn't spoken to her since D-Day, but I agreed. She moved back in on Saturday. I left for the cabin again. It was freezing, but I didn't care. By Monday, I went straight to the office, avoiding home as much as possible. The people there adored my dog. He got spoiled while I kept myself busy. That night, when I finally walked through my front door, I saw her standing there. But all I could see was the image of her in bed with him. That picture was burned into my brain, and I don't think I'll ever be able to erase it. We didn't speak. I went straight to my basement office, buried myself in work, then watched TV down there. Eventually, she came downstairs. "Can we talk?" I barely looked at her. "Not yet." She left me alone after that. I fell asleep in the recliner. The next morning, I woke up early, went to the gym, showered there, and then headed straight to work. That became my routine for the rest of the week, coming home late, avoiding her, keeping myself busy. On Friday, my HR manager checked in on me. After I filled her in on the latest developments, including my therapy visit, she gave me a simple but much-needed piece of advice. "Stop sleeping on couches and chairs. Get yourself a new bed. It was the most logical thing I'd heard in weeks. That day, I withdrew half of our remaining joint funds, her share, and went out to buy a new bed. Delivery was scheduled for Saturday. When the delivery guys called, I was at work, waiting nearby. Before they arrived, I picked up a couple of subs for them and offered each a $25 tip for a small favor. Don't haul the old mattress away. Just lean it up against a tree by the street. I'll take care of the rest. They looked at me like I was crazy. Just trust me. Give me 5 minutes, then come inside. You'll understand. Now, I had considered setting the old mattress on fire in the driveway, but I didn't want to deal with the mess. Instead, I grabbed a can of Blaze orange spray paint, the kind we use for marking job sites, and went to work. In big, bold letters I sprayed, "Wife cheated on me in this bed." The guys came in just as I was finishing up. My wife, sensing something was up, asked, "What's going on?" I didn't even look at her. "I can't sleep in that bed anymore, so I bought myself a new one." She looked upset but retreated downstairs. The new bed was set up. The old mattress remained outside for the entire neighborhood to see. At some point, she came back upstairs flustered. "They left the mattress outside. They're coming back to pick it up." I barely held back a grin. "Oh, I bet they are." A few days later, Valentine's Day rolled around. She tried to be romantic. She initiated intimacy. I recoiled. "I wouldn't touch you if you were the last woman on earth." Her eyes welled up. "We don't just have sex, we make love." I laughed coldly. "We haven't made love since you started screwing your boss." She looked stunned, as if she actually expected me to forget. Did she really think one day of fake affection would erase 9 months of betrayal? I decided it was time to have a real conversation. I motioned for her to sit down. "What do you want to do? Should we try to fix this? Or should we end it and move on?" And for the life of me, I don't know why I even asked. Even now, I can't shake the thought of throwing away 29 years of life together. Some part of me still clings to the idea that maybe, just maybe, this isn't the end. Convince me otherwise. She swears she's willing to do whatever it takes to make things right, to rebuild what she's destroyed. She pleads for my forgiveness, but I can't just give it to her. It doesn't work like that. So I tell her, if she's truly remorseful, she needs to confess to everyone. Her parents, my mom, our kids, and not just a vague, "I made a mistake" kind of confession. She needs to tell them the full truth, including how I found out. Our kids still don't know that part yet. They're coming over tonight. This is going to be brutal. That evening, the living room is packed. My mom, her parents, her sister, her brother-in-law, all gathered, completely unaware of what's coming. I sit as far away from her as possible. They start with concern, their voices gentle. "What's wrong? We love you. Everything's going to be okay." I glance at her. "This story isn't going to tell itself." Her dad stiffens, his eyes already filled with dread, like he knows, deep down, that whatever she's about to say is bad. And to her credit, she doesn't hold back. Through sobs, she confesses everything, every detail, down to the part where I walked in on her and her boss in our bed. Silence. A long, unbearable silence. Then she begs, "Somebody say something." I finally speak. "What exactly do you expect them to say? That you're a horrible person? That you've hurt me more than I can put into words? That you've thrown away 29 years of our lives, ripped apart our family, and wrecked another one in the process? Do you want them to tell you that all the pain, all the destruction, was worth the sex? Was it?" I don't stop. I can't stop. Every ounce of anger, pain, and betrayal I've bottled up comes pouring out. I didn't even know I had it in me to be so vicious. Her mother finally cuts in, voice trembling. That's enough. But her father shakes his head. No! Let her sit with this. She needs to suffer for a while. She breaks down completely and runs upstairs. Her mom instinctively moves to follow, but her dad grabs her arm. Let her be. I talk with them for a while. They offer their support, tell me to call if I need anything. I thank them but assure them I'll be okay. Before they leave, I say something that surprises even me. Despite everything, I still love her. It's the truth. Love doesn't just disappear overnight. But that doesn't mean we can fix this. I tell them she's going to need them more than I do now. That night, I sleep better than I have in weeks. Before leaving for work, I peek into the guest room. She's still awake, her face pale, eyes swollen from crying all night. For the first time since D-Day, I think she finally gets it. Telling her family, hearing me unleash everything I'd been holding back, it shattered the fantasy she'd been living in. I sit on the edge of the bed and tell her we need to talk. More like I talk. She listens. I tell her that I'm 99% certain I want a divorce. But there's still that 1%, that last, desperate part of me that doesn't want to let go. If there's even a sliver of hope, she needs to prove it. Not with words. With actions. She nods through fresh tears. I'll do anything. Just not yet. Please. I take a deep breath. Do you remember the story I told you when my dad died? I was 17. I'd just lost him, and I was a mess. But before he passed, he gave me a piece of advice that stuck with me. You'll face tough times in life, but how you handle them will define who you are. Never make important decisions when you're emotional. At the time, I brushed it off like a dumb teenager. Yeah, Dad. Whatever. But now I wish he were here. I wish I could tell him that I really was listening. I feel my throat tighten. I never cry in front of her. But this time I do. She gets up and hugs me. I don't hug her back. But it's comforting. And that scares me. I tell her she needs to move out. I can't heal if I see her every day. We need to go no contact. She agrees. What else can I do? I don't know yet, but I'll let you know. On my way to work, I call my lawyer and update her. She advises me to prepare for both outcomes, divorce or reconciliation. I ask her to draft the divorce papers, just in case. She also suggests that if I can afford it, I should pay for my wife's first month in an apartment. If things go to court, it'll show I acted in good faith. I agree. By the end of the day, I had already. Heavy checkmark contacted a real estate agent. Heavy checkmark found an apartment. Heavy checkmark paid for February, March, and the security deposit. Heavy checkmark arranged for movers. When I got home, I told her everything. I found you a place. The lease is 6 months. You need to meet the property manager and sign the paperwork. She looked stunned. You already did all this? Yeah. I also told her not to come home from our son's place until she was fully moved in. While she was gone, I had movers clear out whatever she wanted, as long as she left me the essentials, family heirlooms, and my new bed. I expected a fight about money, but surprisingly, she didn't argue. Turns out she hadn't needed any money. She'd been relying on our son and staying between houses. She also told me she had requested a leave of absence from work, probably too ashamed to show her face. Good. I left early on Saturday morning. When I got home later that night, the house was half empty. Even the TV was gone. That was fine. I wanted a bigger one anyway. I swung by my friend's place to pick up the bourbon I'd left with him. No way I was letting myself drown in alcohol alone. And now, as I sit here with a glass in hand, typing all this out, I feel lighter. Tomorrow, I'm hitting the gym. I'm making my favorite chili. I'm buying a new TV. I don't know if I'll ever be okay, but for the first time since this nightmare began, I think I'll survive. The end. For now. Thank you for listening.